The sting of the slap was a firework exploding on my cheek, sharp and sudden, its heat spreading through my entire body. My head snapped to the side with the force of the blow. A collective gasp went through the ballroom, quickly followed by a ripple of cruel, satisfied laughter. "Shut up." The woman who had struck me, a venomous socialite named Tiffany, stood over me, her face contorted in a mask of triumph. Her voice, sharp as glass, cut through the noise. "You pathetic gold digger. Did you really think you could get away with it?" My simple dress was now stained with dark red wine, the fabric clinging uncomfortably to my skin. I was on my knees on a cold marble floor that reflected the glittering chandeliers above, 1,000 mocking lights dancing in my blurry vision. My dignity was scattered around me like shattered glass. They had accused me of theft, ripped my purse from my hands, and now they had laid their hands on me. They all watched. My husband's family, his mother Eleanor, with her icy smile, his sister Chloe, with her triumphant smirk, his father Richard, with his dismissive gaze. And my husband, Mark, the man I had promised my life to, stood a few feet away, his face a pale mask of indecision. He did nothing. He said nothing. He just watched as I was torn apart. But as I looked up at their gloating faces, a single thought, cold and clear as a shard of ice, formed in the chaos of my mind. They had no idea. They had no idea who I was, who my father was, or the colossal, life-altering mistake they had all just made. They saw a charity case, a nobody they could chew up and spit out for their evening's entertainment. They were about to learn that they had just declared war on a kingdom they did not even know existed. If you stay with my story until the very end, you will witness a revenge so complete, so systematic, that it will leave you utterly speechless. You will see how the powerful were brought low, how the arrogant were humbled, and how a woman who was thrown to the ground rose up to become a queen. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. My name is Mia Sterling, though for the past 2 years, I had gone simply by Mia Evans, using my mother's maiden name. It was a lie, but it was a lie with a purpose. My father, Marcus Sterling, was not just a wealthy man. He was a titan of industry, a name whispered with reverence and fear in boardrooms across the globe. Our family name was synonymous with power, with untouchable influence. But I had never wanted that. I wanted something real. My father had raised me after my mother passed, and he had instilled in me 2 core principles. Kindness costs nothing, and a person's true character is revealed not by how they treat their equals, but by how they treat those they believe have nothing to offer them. He had watched me go through relationships where men were more in love with the Sterling name than with the woman who bore it. So, we made a pact. I would live a simple life for a few years, on a modest salary from a job I got on my own merits. And I would find a love that was genuine and untainted by the gleam of gold. I worked as an administrative assistant at a small marketing firm. I rented a small, clean apartment in a modest neighborhood. I drove a reliable, 10-year-old sedan. I was happy, and then I met Mark Davenport. He was charming, handsome, and seemed kind. He was a junior executive at a mid-level investment firm, and he came from what people called old money. His family, the Davenports, were pillars of the local community, their name etched onto museum wings and charity plaques. They were not in my father's league, not even close, but in their own pond, they were the biggest fish. When Mark proposed after a year, I was ecstatic. I thought I had found it, a man who loved me for me. The only shadow was his family. From the moment I met them, I felt like a specimen under a microscope. Eleanor Davenport, his mother, was a woman carved from ice. Her compliments were always double-edged swords. "Oh, Mia, that dress is quite brave," she would say, her eyes scanning my department store purchase with disdain. "It's so wonderful that you don't feel the need to follow trends." Her perfume was always strong, sweet, and suffocating, a floral scent that seemed to mask something rotten underneath. Chloe, his sister, was younger, prettier, and infinitely more cruel. She treated me with a kind of bored contempt, as if my very presence was an irritation she was forced to endure. She would ask me questions she knew I couldn't answer comfortably. "Where do you summer, Mia?" "Oh, right. You work." Then she would laugh, a light, tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. Richard, the patriarch, barely acknowledged my existence. He would shake my hand limply, his eyes already looking past me for someone more important to talk to. To him, I was a ghost at his dinner table, a temporary anomaly in his son's otherwise perfect life. They were snakes in expensive clothes, and their venom was a slow-acting poison of 1,000 tiny cuts. They made comments about my simple background, my lack of prestigious education, and my quaint job. They would host family dinners where the conversation revolved entirely around European vacations, yacht club regattas, and corporate acquisitions, topics they knew I could not contribute to. I was perpetually on the outside, a smudge on their pristine family portrait. Through it all, I held on to Mark. I loved him, and I believed he loved me. But he was weak. When I would tell him, my voice trembling, about something Chloe had said or a look Eleanor had given me, he would sigh and wrap his arms around me. "You're just being sensitive, honey," he would say. "That's just how they are. They're from a different world. You just have to try harder to fit in. Give them time. They'll come around, try harder." I tried until I felt myself eroding. I studied etiquette books. I read the financial news to keep up with their conversations. I spent my meager savings on clothes I thought would meet their approval. I smiled when they insulted me. I laughed at their humorless jokes, and I swallowed my pride until I could no longer taste it. I did it all for Mark. I believed our love was worth the price of my own identity. I was a fool. The breaking point came at Richard and Eleanor's 50th wedding anniversary party. It was the social event of the year, held in the Grand Imperial Hotel's legendary Crystal Ballroom. The irony was almost painful. The Grand Imperial was one of my father's flagship properties, a jewel in the Sterling Enterprises crown. The manager, a kind man named Mr. Henderson whom I'd known since I was a child, greeted me with a discreet, knowing nod at the entrance. He knew the game I was playing. I wore the nicest dress I could afford. It was a simple, elegant navy blue gown, but next to the couture creations worn by the other women, I might as well have been wearing sackcloth. From the moment we arrived, the Davenports made their displeasure clear. "Navy blue, Mia? Really?" Chloe whispered as she kissed the air beside my cheek. "It's a bit funereal, don't you think?" Eleanor eyed me up and down. "At least it's not ostentatious. We wouldn't want you looking like you're trying too hard to be something you're not." The evening was a blur of forced smiles and veiled insults. I stood by Mark's side, a silent accessory, while he networked and laughed with people who looked through me as if I were made of glass. I felt a profound loneliness, a cold ache in the center of my chest that no amount of champagne could warm. The inciting incident happened about 2 hours into the party. Eleanor made a grand, theatrical show of touching her wrist. Her eyes widened in panic. "My bracelet!" she exclaimed, her voice loud enough to draw the attention of everyone nearby. "My diamond tennis bracelet. The one Richard gave me for our 30th. It's gone." A frantic, performative search began. Guests looked under tables and chairs. Staff were called over. Chloe, ever the drama queen, put a comforting arm around her mother. "Don't worry, mother. We'll find it. It must be here somewhere." Her eyes, cold and calculating, landed on me. "Wait a minute," Chloe said, her voice dripping with false realization. "Mia, you were just admiring it, weren't you? You said you'd never seen so many diamonds up close." Every eye in the room turned to me. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was true. I had complimented the bracelet earlier, a polite, meaningless comment. Now she was twisting it into an accusation. "What? No, I stammered, my heart beginning to pound against my ribs. "Let me see your purse," Chloe demanded, stepping towards me. "Chloe, don't be ridiculous," Mark said, but his voice was weak, lacking any real conviction. He made no move to stop her. Before I could react, Chloe snatched the small clutch from my hands. She unclasped it and, with a dramatic flair, turned it upside down. My lipstick, my phone, a few tissues, and my keys clattered onto the floor. And there, shining under the chandelier light with a malicious sparkle, was Eleanor's diamond bracelet. A collective, horrified gasp filled the ballroom. It was a perfectly executed trap. I stood frozen, my mind struggling to process the blatant cruelty of the setup. Chloe must have slipped it into my purse sometime during the evening, waiting for the perfect moment to spring her trap. I knew it. Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling with manufactured grief and rage. "I knew from the day I met you that you were no good. A common little thief, no." I whispered, shaking my head. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and shameful. "I didn't. I would never." I looked at Mark, my eyes pleading with him. "Mark, tell them. You know me. Tell them I wouldn't do this. He looked from me to his mother, his face a battleground of cowardice and conflict. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. He was paralyzed, caught between the woman he claimed to love and the family whose approval he craved more than air. His silence was the deepest betrayal of all. That was when Tiffany, a family friend of the Davenports and a woman who had despised me on sight, stepped forward. She was a bully who had found her perfect target. "You people are all the same," she sneered, her face inches from mine. "You latch onto good families and try to bleed them dry. You have no class, no breeding. That's not true," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Please, you have to believe me." "Shut up," she screamed. And then she slapped me. The force sent me stumbling backward. I collided with a waiter's tray, and a glass of red wine tipped, splashing down the front of my dress in a dark, ugly stain. I lost my balance and fell to my knees. The sound of the crowd's laughter was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. People were pulling out their phones, their screens glowing in the dim light like a host of malevolent fireflies. They were recording my deepest humiliation. Chloe walked over and crouched down, her smile a cruel slash in her perfect face. "Having a nice trip?" she purred, and then, with a vicious tug, she ripped the sleeve of my dress. The sound of tearing fabric was as loud as a gunshot in the suddenly quiet room. I looked up, my vision blurred by tears, searching for my husband. I found him. He was standing with his father, and as my eyes met his, he did the most unforgivable thing of all. He turned his back on me. He physically turned away, presenting me with the broad, tailored expanse of his suit jacket. He had made his choice. My heart did not just break. It shattered into a million irreparable pieces. The love I had fought so hard for, the future I had believed in, it was all a lie. In that single, cowardly movement, he had erased me. "Get her out of here," Richard Davenport's voice boomed, full of disgust. "I won't have this trash ruining my wife's party." Two large security guards, employed by the hotel but taking their orders from the Davenports, moved towards me. They grabbed my arms, their grips bruisingly tight. I didn't fight. I had nothing left to fight with. They hauled me to my feet and began to drag me across the ballroom. My shoes scraped against the marble. No one moved to help. No one spoke a word in my defense. They just watched, their faces a mixture of pity, scorn, and morbid curiosity. They dragged me through the opulent lobby, past the stunned faces of hotel guests, and out through the grand revolving doors. They did not stop until we were on the curb, and then they shoved me forward, hard. I stumbled and fell onto the cold, gritty pavement of the street. The doors swung shut behind me, sealing me out in the cool night air. I was left there, on the sidewalk, with a torn dress, a stained cheek, and a heart that had been hollowed out. The laughter from inside still echoed in my ears. I sat there for a long moment, the world a dizzying blur. A valet, a young man with kind eyes, hesitantly approached me. He had seen everything. He took off his uniform jacket and gently draped it over my shoulders. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked softly. I couldn't speak. I just shook my head, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on my face. His small act of kindness was a pinprick of light in an overwhelming darkness. He was a stranger, and he had shown me more decency than my own husband. It was that kindness that broke the spell of my shock. My grief and shame began to curdle, hardening into something else. Something cold and hard and sharp. It was rage. A pure, cleansing fury. They had wanted to break me. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. I reached into the pocket of the valet's jacket, where my phone had landed when I fell. My hands were shaking, but my fingers were steady as I navigated to my contacts. I pressed the first name on my favorites list. It rang once. "Mia? Is everything all right?" His voice was warm, paternal, the voice that had comforted me my entire life. I took a shaky breath, the dam of my control finally breaking. A sob escaped my lips. "Dad?" I whispered, my voice cracking. "I need you." The warmth in his voice vanished, replaced instantly by a chilling, controlled calm. It was the voice he used when empires were about to fall. "Where are you?" "The Grand Imperial," I choked out. They threw me out." There was a pause, a silence so profound I could feel the weight of it through the phone. Then he spoke, and his voice was the sound of winter. It was cold, controlled, and utterly furious. "Stay exactly where you are, Mia," he said. "Don't move. I'm coming." He hung up. I didn't have to wait long. Perhaps 10 minutes. It started as a low rumble in the distance, a sound that grew steadily louder until it was a thrumming beat that vibrated through the pavement. Then they appeared. A motorcade of 5 black, identical SUVs, their tinted windows impenetrable, turned the corner and pulled up to the curb in a perfectly synchronized halt. They formed a silent, intimidating barricade in front of the hotel's grand entrance. Doors opened in unison, and a dozen men in dark, impeccably tailored suits emerged. They moved with the quiet efficiency of a special forces unit, securing the perimeter. The door of the lead vehicle opened, and my father, Marcus Sterling, stepped out. He was not a tall man, but he possessed an aura of power that made him seem to tower over everyone around him. His hair was silver at the temples, and his face was calm, but his eyes were burning with a cold, black fire I had not seen in years. He saw me, huddled on the curb in a borrowed jacket, and for a fleeting moment, a look of profound pain crossed his face. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a mask of implacable fury. He walked over to me and knelt down, ignoring the expensive fabric of his trousers on the dirty sidewalk. He gently touched my bruised cheek. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice dangerously soft. I couldn't answer. I just pointed a trembling finger towards the hotel. He stood up, his gaze fixed on the entrance. Mr. Henderson, the hotel manager, had come rushing out, his face pale with alarm. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry. I had no idea," he began, wringing his hands. My father held up a hand, silencing him. "Get your head of security, and lock every exit to this building. No one leaves." "Yes, sir." "Right away, sir." Mr. Henderson practically ran to do his bidding. My father helped me to my feet and led me to one of the SUVs. "Wait here, sweetheart," he said, his voice now gentle, for my ears only. "This will not take long." He then turned and walked towards the hotel, his team of men parting before him like water. He didn't run. He didn't shout. He just walked, and the calm, deliberate pace of his stride was more terrifying than any open display of rage. He entered the crystal ballroom, and I watched on a small screen inside the car, which was linked to the hotel's security feed. The party had resumed, though the atmosphere was still buzzing from the earlier drama. The Davenports were holding court, accepting sympathetic words from their guests. The moment my father stepped into the room, a hush fell over the crowd. Every head turned. They didn't know who he was, but they could feel the seismic shift of power his presence created. Richard Davenport, emboldened by his perceived victory, stepped forward. "Excuse me, sir. This is a private event." My father ignored him completely. His eyes scanned the room, cold and assessing. His voice, when he finally spoke, was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the vast ballroom, amplified by the sudden, dead silence. "Which one of you?" he began, his voice dropping to a low, lethal growl. "Put your hands on my daughter?" The silence stretched, thick and heavy. 100 confused faces stared back at him. Daughter? What was he talking about? Tiffany, puffed up with arrogance, laughed nervously. "I think you have the wrong party, old man. The only person who got what she deserved tonight was a little thief." My father's eyes locked onto her. A slow, chilling smile touched his lips, but it did not reach his eyes. You must be Tiffany." He snapped his fingers. One of his men stepped forward and handed him a microphone from the band stage. At the same moment, the massive projection screen behind the stage, which had been displaying a slideshow of the Davenports, flickered to life. "Good evening, everyone," my father said into the microphone, his voice now booming through the room's sound system. "My apologies for the interruption. My name is Marcus Sterling." A wave of gasps and frantic whispers swept through the crowd. The Sterling name was legend. Even in their insulated world, everyone knew that name. Richard and Eleanor Davenport's faces went white. "I am the owner of Sterling Enterprises," he continued calmly. "Which means I am the owner of this hotel. I am the owner of the bank that holds the mortgage on the Davenport estate. And, as of an hour ago, I am the majority shareholder and new owner of Davenport & Sons Investments." The color drained completely from Richard Davenport's face. He looked like he was going to be sick. Eleanor swayed on her feet, grabbing her husband's arm for support. "And I," my father said, his voice dropping again as his eyes swept the room, "am the father of the young woman you just humiliated and threw into the street." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I am Mia's father. The shock in the room was a palpable force. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. Chloe looked as if she had seen a ghost. Mark stared, his mouth hanging open, his mind clearly unable to compute this new reality. Now, there seems to have been a misunderstanding about a stolen bracelet, my father said, his tone deceptively light. He gestured to the screen. Let's clear that up, shall we? The screen lit up with a high-definition security feed. It was from a camera positioned in a corner of the ballroom. It clearly showed Chloe, earlier in the evening, when she thought no one was watching, talking to me near the bar. With a swift, practiced movement, she had slipped the bracelet from her own wrist and dropped it into my unattended purse. The evidence was undeniable. The conspiracy was laid bare for all to see. Chloe let out a small, strangled cry. It appears, my father said, his voice dripping with ice, that the thief is still in the room. He turned his gaze on the Davenports. You four have built your lives on the illusion of class and respectability. You judge people based on the labels on their clothes and the size of their bank accounts. You mistake wealth for worth. Tonight, you made a grave error. You targeted my daughter. You assumed she was weak, that she was alone, that she had nothing. He took a deliberate step towards them. They shrank back as if from a physical blow. Let me be clear about what happens now, he said, his voice a low, brutal instrument of their destruction. Richard, as of this moment, you are fired from the company your grandfather built. A security team is at your office right now, boxing up your personal effects. They will be mailed to you. Eleanor, the foreclosure notice on your home was filed 30 minutes ago. You have 48 hours to vacate the premises. The Sterling Bank does not take kindly to fraud. He turned to Chloe. Chloe, the trust fund your grandfather established for you? Its assets were managed by a subsidiary that I acquired last week. I have just instructed them to dissolve the fund and donate the entire principal to a charity for underprivileged women. Ironic, isn't it? He saved his final, coldest gaze for Tiffany. As for you, your father's company has been trying to secure a contract with one of my subsidiaries for 6 months. I have just personally vetoed that contract. I have also made a few calls. By morning, every line of credit he has will be revoked. You wanted to feel powerful by striking a defenseless woman. You will now learn what it feels like to be truly powerless. They were ruined. Systematically, publicly, and completely. Their social standing, their wealth, their entire world, erased in less than 5 minutes. It was then that Mark finally broke from his stupor. He rushed towards the exit, towards the car where I was watching everything unfold. He stumbled out onto the street, his face wild with desperation. He saw me standing by the SUV, my father's men forming a protective wall around me. Mia, he cried, his voice cracking. Mia, I am so sorry. I didn't know. If I had known who you were, I would never have let them. Please, you have to believe me. And in that moment, all my pain, all my fear, vanished. It was replaced by a profound, clarifying calm. I stepped forward, and my father's men parted for me. I looked at the man I had once loved, the man who had turned his back on me, and I felt nothing but pity. You still don't get it, do you, Mark? I said, and I was surprised by the strength and clarity in my own voice. It was a voice I hadn't heard in 2 years. It was my voice. You think the problem is that you didn't know my father was Marcus Sterling? I continued, each word a carefully placed stone. But the real problem is that you didn't know who I was. You didn't know I was a woman who deserved to be defended. You didn't know I was a person who deserved to be respected, regardless of her last name. You say you wouldn't have let them hurt me if you knew I was rich. That doesn't make you a good man. It just makes you a coward and an opportunist. He reached for me, his hands trembling. Please, Mia, we can fix this. I love you. I took a step back. No, you don't. You love what you think I can give you now. You failed the one test that mattered. When I needed a husband, you chose to be your mother's son. Our marriage is over. My lawyers will be in touch. I turned my back on him, the same way he had turned his back on me. But unlike him, I did it not out of cowardice, but out of strength. I walked back to my father, who put a proud, protective arm around my shoulders. We got into the car, and as we drove away, I didn't look back once. 6 months passed. 6 months of healing, of rediscovery, of becoming the woman I was always meant to be. I shed the meek, apologetic shell of Mia Evans and fully embraced being Mia Sterling. Not for the money or the power, but for the platform it gave me. My father made me the vice president of the newly formed Sterling Philanthropic Foundation. Our mission was to fund education and business startups for women from disadvantaged backgrounds, women like the one the Davenports thought I was. I found a purpose that was more fulfilling than any romance. I did hear about the Davenports. Their fall from grace was swift and brutal. Their friends abandoned them overnight. They lost the house, the cars, the company. Richard suffered a minor heart attack from the stress. I saw Eleanor once, working as a cashier at a high-end grocery store. Her hands, once adorned with jewels, were chapped and red. She didn't recognize me. One evening, I was hosting a major fundraising gala for our foundation. It was at the Grand Imperial, in the very same crystal ballroom. As I moved through the crowd, accepting donations and shaking hands, I saw one of the caterers. It was Chloe. She was wearing a black and white uniform, balancing a tray of appetizers. Our eyes met across the room. The shame and humiliation in her gaze were profound. She quickly looked away and disappeared into the kitchens. The most surreal encounter happened later that night. A guest at my table complimented the service, and I turned to thank the waitress who was refilling our water glasses. It was Tiffany. Her face was pale, her eyes downcast. She froze when she saw me, her hand shaking so badly that water sloshed onto the tablecloth. "Miss Sterling," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I am so sorry." The old me would have cried or run away. The vengeful part of me might have savored the moment. But the woman I had become did neither. I looked at her, at this broken, humbled person, and I felt a strange sense of peace. I gave her a small, polite nod. "I appreciate that," I said calmly. "Please, don't worry about the water." I offered her forgiveness, not for her sake, but for mine. Holding on to that hatred would only poison my own heart. My father had given me justice. It was up to me to find peace. My real revenge was not their downfall. My real revenge was my own happiness, my own success, and the good I was now able to do in the world. They tried to throw me in the dirt, but they didn't realize they were burying a seed. I learned the hardest lesson of my life that night on the cold marble floor. I learned that you should never shrink yourself to fit into places you've outgrown. And I learned that a person's true worth is not measured by their wealth or their family name, but by the integrity of their character and the courage in their heart. My father's power saved me from the wolves, but it was finding my own voice that taught me how to roar.